Okay, in this video I wanted to show you a couple of slightly more advanced techniques with the animation. So to that end I've got the tank model here, but I've also added a shell to the tank. So you zoom in on that, you can see that there's a shell that's the right size to fit into the cannon here. So I'm going to hide the shell way back at the back of the cannon. So in side view ortho, I'm going to switch into wireframe mode using the Z key, and I'm going to grab that on the Y axis and just move it back. I need to zoom out a little. Grab on the Y and move it back to there. So, well, it probably doesn't need to be that far back, but that's fine. That'll do. So it's way back at the back of the cannon, and I want to set that to be a child of the cannon. So I'm going to shift select the cannon and set that to be the parent by doing Control P. So now if I move the cannon, the shell comes with me. Here we go. And if I move the turret, the cannon and the shell come with me, and if I move the body, everything comes with me. Okay, so that's set up the parenting on the object and the shell ready to be fired out of the end of the cannon later. Come back out of wireframe, have a look through my camera perspective at what I'm looking at. Okay, so this is going to be somewhat similar to the previous animation with a couple of key differences. So I'm going to really quickly grab the tank on the Y, fire it off screen, and insert a keyframe for that. And then on frame 60, I'll grab the tank on the Y, move it into shot, and insert a keyframe there. Oops. Making sure my mouse is inside the 3D view. And so that gives me the start of my animation, just like we did last time. Okay. One of the interesting things about the animation that we didn't talk about last time is exactly how it does this animation here. It does a slow, what's called slow in, slow out. So it starts to accelerate slowly, and then it doesn't stop suddenly, it decelerates as well. So you can see that happening. It accelerates and then decelerates towards the end of the move. So it doesn't start going at its full speed and suddenly stop. It has that smooth in, smooth out, operation there. So just like a real vehicle, you would expect it to accelerate and then come to a halt slowly. Okay, back in here, I'm going to rotate the cannon to point up a little bit. Partly I'm doing this because I didn't do it properly in the last video, and I wanted to show you what I'd done wrong. So if I pop over to frame, I'm going to just click on layer 1. If I pop over to frame 120, and then what I'm going to do is go into local settings for the cannon. Actually, I've just realized this is going to work better if I turn the turret just a little bit. So I'm going to rotate. Actually, I want to go back to 60. Yeah, I'm going to go back to 60. Insert a keyframe for the turret, and then actually I'll do a quick rotate onto frame 100 around the Z, and just actually I'll aim it in that direction. There we go, and insert a keyframe. So what I'm wanting to do is to show you how I got this wrong last time. So I want to rotate the cannon, but first I need to insert a keyframe and then move to the next point, maybe 140. And if I was to rotate it around the X that's global, it actually loses its position somewhat. That's difficult to see from this angle. I'll zoom in here and you'll see what I'm talking about. So if let's change it to ortho, because then that gives me an even better view of how wrong this goes. So if I rotate that on the global X, it starts to spin off to the left. Do you see that? And that was the problem I was having in the last one. What I had done was I'd switched this to local, and then imagined that when I did the rotation on X that it should be on the local axis, but you can see there's no difference between that rotation and the one I did previously. The trouble is that when you switch to local, you have to use the widgets in order to do the work. So that's the rotation widget, and to rotate it on its local axis you have to use that one. So oops. So now it goes straight up and down. You see that? Now it goes straight up and down. Let's just get an angle on that to make sure from the camera's perspective it doesn't look too mad. I'm going to bring that down a little bit. There we go, and then insert a keyframe. So that's why I had done wrong last time. And I'm going to switch the widget off because it kind of gets in the way of my mojo. And I think, yeah, I'll go back to the start and press play just to see what it looks like. So press play, turret turns, cannon lifts on its own axis. And that's us sitting at frame 140. So I just was messing around with the wireframe setting here just so that we could have a look at what that looks like with the wireframe and with the bullet in the chamber, as it were, or the shell in the tank cannon selected there. So it comes in from off screen. You can see the shell is there inside the cannon, and now that's where we get to, and the shell is pointing up the way. The next thing I want to do is make the shell fire out of the cannon, and so this is where we have to learn about interpolation modes, which I'll talk about in just a second. So I want to move the shell according to its local axis now. Oops, hang on. There we go, I've selected it, which is not as easy as it looks. And I want to do a transformation, so I need to change to the transformation manipulator or widget. And you can see that on its local axis, that's pointing in the right direction. So I'm gonna go back to the cannon for a second so I can see, yeah, we went to frame 140. So on frame 140 I need to set the location of that by inserting a keyframe, and then we could maybe move on. We want it to be fairly fast, so I'm just going to go 10 frames, and then I'm going to grab it along its own z-axis and fling it off the screen, and then insert a keyframe for that. So now if I play the animation through again, we should see the cannon lift and then fire the shell out. If we watch that again, we can see that it's, even though it happens quite fast, it's still got the slow in, slow out kind of idea. So the shell, the tank decelerates, then the turret starts moving and it accelerates and then decelerates, and then the lift is an acceleration, deceleration, and all that looks good. And then the bullet comes out and it accelerates too, and well, you might imagine that would be true. It probably would accelerate very fast, but I want to give it just a uniform speed as it comes out of the cannon there, and get rid of the acceleration part of that. And I also don't want it to slow down as it leaves the screen. If anything, it should be speeding up or at a uniform speed. In order to do that, I need to change the interpolation mode, and so I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to make this window a little bit smaller. I'm going to give myself a new window here, and underneath the timeline I'm going to switch this to the graph editor. And the graph editor shows me a lot of information about the movement that's happening, just in a different form. So on frame 160 we can see, actually on frame 140 and then to 160 we can see that there's a set of what are the location, rotation and scale values. And if I expand over on the left hand side, you can see that there's an X, Y and Z for location, an X, Y and Z for rotation, and an X, Y and Z for scale coming through there. And the curve between them, you can sort of play around with the settings here. Let's see, how do I do that? Yeah, if I grab it there and pull that along, and then you can use your panning and your zooming in and zooming out just like you do in the other windows. And so what I'm trying to do is emphasize that curve there. So you can see, I'll switch off the selected parts. So you can see this is me on frame 140 right here. And then I'll select them again, and then it curves down to frame 160. And that curve is the location movement being changed over time. So let's go over here and say that we don't want to see rotation, and we don't want to see scaling, and so that all we're left with should be just the 3 values there for location. So if I was to deselect everything by pressing A and box select those 3 points, you can grab them and move them around, you see. So now I'm moving the location of the bullet. Actually, I'm moving it on frame 140, which is interesting. I'm changing its location on frame 140, which for some reason is making it change location here as well. That's interesting. If I go back to frame 140 and then grab those again, yeah, you can see how that changes the location of the bullet. And you can go mad, you can change it all over the place, or you can limit yourself to the x-axis like that. So I'm going to undo that. Have I messed up its position? Oh, hang on. I did some undoing there to get rid of a mistake I'd made. So, oops. Done it again. Hang on. So I've selected this point on frame 160, which is the, it actually highlights over here as the Y location of the bullet. And these are Bezier handles on a Bezier curve. So if you start messing around, you can change the speed at which it slows down or speeds up. So this is it speeding up. That's it going a uniform speed, and then that's it slowing down again as it reaches the end point. So if I grab that point and start moving it, you see how it moves the bullet around between, makes it either go slower if you increase the time it takes to get there, or faster if you decrease the time it takes to get there. Anyway, I'm not going to mess around with the position of that. What I want to do is change this curve. So instead of it being a curve, it's just a straight line, and that means that the speed will be uniform. Oops. To do this, you just need to make sure you're in the graph editor and press T, and it gives you options for the interpolation mode. So I'm going to change it to linear. Oh wait, I think I need to have something selected first. Okay, T, linear, there we go. So with those 2 points selected, I've changed the interpolation mode on that particular part of the animation to linear, so it should come out at a linear speed now. Let's check and see what happens. If I go back to here in the animation and then press play, it's just at a fixed speed now instead of speeding up and slowing down. So back here, press play, linear speed. So if you want linear speed rather than slow in, slow out, then you need to come in here to the graph editor and change the linear interpolation. If you want to move a key point, then let's just see. I locked some of these here. I'll unlock them. If you want to choose move a keyframe, then you need to come in here, deselect everything. You can box select, and you can grab on the X, and you can move keyframes around. You can see that the yellow line that represents the keyframe in the timeline is moving right and left as I move this. So if you wanted the cannon, if you wanted the bullet to fire faster or slower, you could adjust when that occurs by moving that. Okay, when you're finished messing around with the graph editor, it's probably very relieving to close it down and then go back and focus on whatever it was you were doing. So going back to where we were here, let's have a look, see what the video looks like from the start. Here we go, play, turn, up, and fire. And it looks like it hasn't quite left the screen at that point, so I should maybe move it a little bit further on. So if I go back to the graph editor and look at that last keyframe and just grab and move to the X a little bit. The first thing I tried didn't work there, so I kind of I've reversed, went and did a bit of experimentation. So I want to make sure I've selected the Y location in the graph editor, and if I grab it, actually it's not if I move it left, because if I move it to the right it actually takes it back towards the turret. If I move it down the way, it starts to move it, so that's in the Y. It's moved it further off screen now, so I'll maybe stick with that. There we go. So some of this it's going to involve a little bit of trial and error. So we'll go back to the animation now and see what happens. Okay, so here we go. Cannon goes up and fire the bullet, and it ends up off screen. Okay. Now I felt that the bullet was now moving too slowly, and that's because I moved these this point that was at 160, I moved it over to 180, so I'm just grabbing it back now to fix that last thing. Oops. So grabbing on the X, move it back to 160. There we go, that should make it happen faster. So if I go to 140, press play, there we go, that's more like it. So 140, press play, now it's fast enough. Okay, I am done with that. So I'm gonna minimize that again, come back, go all the way back to the beginning, press play, make sure I'm happy with the animation. There we go.